I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, let's talk about the fact that Russia has offered to give passports to Ukrainians living in the breakaway regions of the Donbas. This comes right after the elections, obviously, that just passed with Zelensky winning the presidency. What is going on here, Alexander? What does this mean? Is this a signal to Zelensky? Was this brewing for some time now? What's the reason for this happening?
I think to answer your question, it's both been brewing for some time, and it is a signal to Zelensky, because of course the Russians could have delayed the announcement of this thing, but they timed it very carefully to come out when the election results were rolling in Ukraine. And I don't think that's chance, and I don't think that's coincidence. Now, let's first of all explain that the people of the two breakaway regions of the Ukraine in the Donbas, the people of the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, to give them the name that these two regions have given themselves, these people have been Ukrainian citizens. The Russian government has been supporting an agreement that was made between Ukraine and Russia, and which was brokered, and Russia brokered it, but it was also signed by the leaders of these two regions, and it's the Minsk agreement. That agreement envisages these two regions eventually being reintegrated into Ukraine as part of a political process to end the war, which will result in a new Ukrainian constitution. And that constitution, if you read the text of the Minsk agreement, it's fairly clear that envisages very considerable autonomy for these two regions. That agreement also calls for an end to the economic blockade of those regions by Ukraine. Now, the agreement has not been implemented. Ukraine has not implemented it. There's been no movement either on the political front to bring a proper negotiation for a new constitution. There's not been a proper law, a negotiated law for the autonomy of these regions. And most importantly of all, and most pertinently here, the economic blockade of these two regions continues exactly as before. So what the Russians have been saying is that these people have been neglected, essentially abandoned by Ukraine. They've not got any active citizenship of any recognized country that they can call their own. They can't travel because they don't have proper passports. They can't get social security payments because Ukraine won't pay their social security payments. So what Russia is doing is it is stepping in and it is offering its passports, its citizenship in effect, on an accelerated basis to people of these two breakaway regions. The people of these two breakaway regions, it is important to remember, are Russian-speaking Orthodox Eastern Slavs. They are no different from people in Russia in ethnic, religious, cultural, or language terms. So granting them citizenship is not, in a sense, a great break. So I think this has been brewing for a long time. However, it is a powerful move, and it is a powerful signal to Zelensky coming when it does, because granting these people citizenship, and the word from Moscow is that up to 90% of them are likely to take up this offer of citizenship. Granting these people citizenship means that Russia will be under a legal duty to protect them because they will be Russia's citizens. So if the Ukrainian army were ever again to launch an attack on these people, Russia would have a legal duty to come to their rescue. And I think that by granting them citizenship in this way, the Russians are saying very pointedly to Zelensky, yes, We've heard some of the things you said before and during the election. Yes, we are very glad to see the back of Poroshenko, your previous pro-Maidan ultra-nationalist Ukrainian president. Yes, the door for negotiation based on the Minsk agreement is still open. However, don't expect us under any circumstances to abandon the people of the Donbas to their fate. We are not so interested in doing a deal with you that we are prepared to make concessions that will put their future at risk or in jeopardy. On the contrary, we stand with them, we're giving them our citizenship, and we will protect them.
All right, so Poroshenko disenfranchised these people. I mean, that's really what happened to them. They were disenfranchised very inhumanely, I would add.
Absolutely.
No passports, they were in limbo, so to speak.
Yes.
They couldn't travel, they weren't getting their pensions. I imagine pensions, healthcare, all kinds of things.
Absolutely.
What does Zelensky do?
Well, this is of course the huge question.
What should he do? What should he do? What's the smart thing for Zelensky to do?
I have absolutely no doubt about that. In fact, it's extremely simple. What Zelensky needs to do is to pick up the telephone, call Putin, say to Putin, I want direct talks, not just with Russia, but with the leaders of these two republics. I want to press on with the Minsk agreement and see a way to reintegrate these two republics back into Ukraine on the basis of a new Ukrainian constitution. If he does that, that will break the logjam, and we will perhaps start to see a real process in Ukraine that could lead to peace and to a peaceful reunification of Ukraine. It would be a very different Ukraine from the one we saw post-2014, because the people of these two regions would remain opposed to this process of Ukrainianization that the Maidan government has followed since the coup of 2014. But it would nonetheless be a Ukraine which would exist within its internationally recognized borders, except for Crimea, which is now fully integrated into Russia and which would never return. That is what Zelensky should do. I am far from confident that that is what Zelensky will do. I think Zelensky will probably not want to do it. And there is a very interesting report, which I read in the Financial Times a few days ago, which said that some of Zelensky's team had floated in Washington the idea of a Zelensky government entering into direct talks with the leaders of the two breakaway republics of the Donbas, and that it was the United States, in other words, the State Department, Pompeo and his people, Pompeo and Volker and all the others, who advised against it, saying that if you do that, you'll be admitting that this is a civil conflict within Ukraine itself, and that you will no longer be able to claim that it is an aggression against Ukraine by Russia, and at that point you will lose Western support.
Yeah, but does Ukraine even have the Western support that it had, post-Maidan, especially financially? I mean, you've said it many times, Europe, Germany, they don't want anything to do with Ukraine at this point in time. The U.S., I think, is just using Ukraine as a cudgel against Russia. I mean, that's really all it is at this point. They don't care about Ukraine as a country or as a people.
You're absolutely right. And can I say straight away, if Zelensky has any political understanding of the situation, he should understand this. Ukraine is being used, and it is not in its interest that it should continue to be used as part of a broader Western geopolitical play against Russia. Ukraine needs good relations with Russia if it is to prosper economically and if it is to achieve internal peace. The roadmap to doing that is there. The problem is, I'm not sure whether Zelensky himself understands it. And I'm sorry to say there are powerful forces within Ukraine itself which are so passionately anti-Russian and so passionately committed to a centralized Ukraine in which Ukrainianization is pursued to its ultimate, so that basically only the Ukrainian language and the Ukrainian church are only the Ukrainian language is spoken, only the Ukrainian church is the church that's allowed to continue practicing. Those people will furiously oppose any of the steps for a genuine rapprochement, both with Russia and with the two people's republics that I spoke about.
Yeah, the centralization, that's where the money's at. That's where the big money's at. So, yeah, I can see why those forces don't want to have federalization, because then a lot of the money, both on Ukraine's side and on the side of D.C., the swamp, both sides are going to lose out if you have federalization.
Correct.
But
that's the sticking point. I mean, they will furiously oppose it, and they will oppose it from outside Ukraine, as Zelensky discovered in Washington, and they will oppose it from within Ukraine itself. And these are powerful forces. They may not be the majority. In fact, the elections in Ukraine strongly suggest that they are a small minority, but they are a powerful minority. They also include men with guns.
So now, if you said 90% of the people in East Ukraine, in Donbas, they accept the passport, they accept the citizenship, doesn't Russia run the risk of then having DC, the swamp, the mainstream media, the Western mainstream media coming out and saying that this is a de facto annexation of East Ukraine? I mean, the minute 90% of the population has Russian citizenship, in essence, they're going to come out with the narrative that now that part of East Ukraine de facto belongs to Russia. So, I mean, doesn't that embolden also the ultra-right neo-Nazi forces in the West as well? Those groups are also going to get emboldened. I mean, doesn't Russia run a little bit of a risk by doing this?
It's very interesting that you asked that question, because, of course, Russia runs that risk. It's already been said that the point about creeping annexation by Russia of the two breakaway republics is being talked about all over the place. If you read the transcripts of recent press conferences that Putin has given in Vladivostok and in Beijing, that those comments have been that has been expressly said to him by Western reporters. What is very interesting is that the Russians, knowing this risk, nonetheless decided to take it. And I'm going to make a guess here. I think that the reason the Russians took that risk is because they no longer fear taking it. Back in 2014, the Russians were very, very careful about how far they were prepared to back the people of the two people's republics. At that time, Russia's economy was very tightly integrated into the West. The financial system was essentially part of the global financial system. And I don't think they felt confident that they had the wholesale backing of China at their back in any conflict with the West over Ukraine. What has now happened is that Russia has now adjusted to the sanctions. It's increasingly separated its financial system from the West. It can survive a cut-off from SWIFT. It's built up huge reserves. It's stabilized its economy. And it has now forged ahead with its relationship with China. And I think it is now confident of Chinese backing in any showdown with the West. So I think the Russians now feel in a far stronger position than they did in 2014. And I think they're saying to themselves, well, the West may complain about this, but we simply don't care. We're going to do it anyway. And they've just done it.
That's a good analysis. But we talk about, throwing Zelensky into the deep end of the pool. He becomes president. This is, he's got to make some big decisions now.
Absolutely. It puts the pressure on him because, as I said, it shows to Zelensky that the Russians are in no mood to make concessions on this issue. As far as they're concerned, there's an agreement, the Minsk agreement, which they pushed Poroshenko to sign, and they'd managed to get him to sign in 2015, very much against his will, but it's there. They will insist on implementing it, and they will not abandon the people of the Donbas. They made that absolutely clear. They couldn't have said it more clearly than they've done.
And let's not forget that, Russia has also wrapped up Nord Stream 2. They've got Turk Stream. Those pipelines are going to come into play very soon, and Ukraine's going to take a big hit, I imagine, economically. Is that correct? I mean, that's going to be added pressure.
Absolutely. And of course, the Russians have now started to put the squeeze in a serious way on the Ukrainian economy in other ways, because they're starting to slow down exports of energy to Ukraine, for Ukraine. So they're now starting to impose their own sanctions on Ukraine. They've scaled down their purchases of Ukrainian goods. So the Ukrainian economy, which Zelensky is committed to improving, is actually looking as if it's going to come under massive renewed pressure.
And I imagine there's no real place for Ukrainian goods in Europe. I mean,
well, this has been
give or take agricultural products. I can't imagine there's anything.
Well, it's interesting you mention agricultural products, because, of course, this is one of the things I think that the Ukrainians were gambling on. I think they thought that Europe would want Ukrainian agricultural products. But, of course, there are many, many, many farmers in Europe. And the very last thing those farmers want is to be undercut by a flood of Ukrainian cheap food. So even that hasn't happened to anything like the extent that I think the Ukrainians imagined it would. And as for Ukrainian industrial goods, as many, many people pointed out, the Europeans are simply not interested in them.
All right. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below. Click on that notifications bell to get notifications every time we push out a new video. And visit the Duran shop. Buy a t-shirt. Help support the Duran. In the description box down below, you will find links to our PayPal and Patreon pages. Please donate to us. It really helps us out a lot. And of course, you get a copy of this video in audio format. Follow us on iTunes and on SoundCloud as well. And don't forget, you can also follow us on Instagram, @theduran_com. And you can follow our channel on Blank Chat to get notifications. Download the app. Links are in the description box down below as well. And go to our new Duran site and see all the articles that Alexander is linking up to every day. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you once again. Until next time, everybody, take care.